And defining requirement, actually it is considered a specialty nowadays, which means a business analyst or business or software engineer specialize in requirement. Requirement definition is the topic of interest groups as well as the subject of professional certification programs. So requirement को define करना एक specialty समझाता है, और इसके लिए we have particular certifications as well nowadays. So they are considered as a separate entity or important entity of a project. There are a number of problems related to that. The clear, correct, and concise writing of requirement so that they can be converted into specification that can be directly used by colleagues such as architects, designers, programmers, and testers. So clear, correct, और concise requirement establish करना बहुत ज़रूरी है, जिसको क्योंकि इसी ने आगे convert होना होता है specification में, और specification जो है वो later on जो बाकी आपकी टीम है वो use करती है to build the software, just like architects, designers, programmers, or testers. It must be understood that there are certain number of activities that must be mastered when eliciting requirements. उनमें कौन-कौन सी activities है? सबसे पहले तो ये कि आप अपने key players या stakeholders हैं वो identify करें. So identifying the stakeholders से मुराद है कि वो लोग जिनका directly or indirectly project से जो link बनता है. So identifying the stakeholder is one of the key you can say activity during this phase. Then another important activity is managing the meetings with the stakeholders, because managing everyone is busy when you are working for a big you can say organization where everyone has a different role and they have daily duties to fulfill. So in that case, you have to manage the meetings with each one of them to gather a requirement for the project. And so managing meeting is one of the essential personal skill for the requirement for the people who are gathering the requirement of a project. Then interview techniques that can identify differences between wishes, expectations, and actual needs. So this is very important that you, apart from other skills, when you are gathering a requirement, actually you must have a good interview techniques so that you can decipher between what are the wishes of the customers, what are the expectations of the customers, and what are actual requirements or needs of the customer. So clear, concise documentation of functional requirements, performance requirements, obligation, and properties of future system. So clarity is one of the major property that is required at this stage, because if there is any you can say gray area or there is any doubt in the requirement elicitation process, so it will lead to the defects or errors or failures in the future, which will cost a lot of money to the firm later on. So applying systematic techniques for requirement elicitation and managing priorities and changes. So this is also one of the, you can say, skill or you can say trait for that you require for the person going for a requirement elicitation. It is clear that errors can arise when eliciting requirements. It can be difficult to cater to the wishes, expectations, and needs of many different user groups at the same time. So it is really a challenging task actually to fulfill or go for, or you can say to fulfill the expectations, the needs, and the wishes of everyone in an organization. So to gather information by questionnaires, interviews, or documentation, and to just you can say present a very logical or clear view of the project is very important when you are mining the you can say information from all that data. So therefore, it is important to pay particular attention to erroneous requirement definitions, the lack of definitions for critical obligations and software characteristics, and the addition of unnecessary requirements, for example, those not requested by the customer, the lack of attention to the business priorities, and fuzzy requirement descriptions. So these are all the things that need to be considered when you are going for the requirement elicitation. So the important thing here is that you define the thing clearly, with clarity and in a concise manner, so that later on everyone can understand what was the what are the you can say needs of the project or needs of the people are. So clarity in the definition of major processes or terms is very important. Another important thing is that you need to prioritize your business. You can say business. I mean, you have certain priorities in your business, so you need to see that what are the priorities in your business, so that you can avoid some requirements which are not you can say demanded or requested by customer at all. And also you can avoid fuzzy requirement descriptions as well. A requirement that can be of good quality when it has the following characteristics, as we have discussed already, that it should be correct, it should be complete, it should be clear for each stakeholder group. Stakeholder, as I discussed, they can be client, system architects, testers, and those who will maintain the system in the future. So correctness, completeness, and clarity. So unambiguous, it should be unambiguous. Concise. Concise means it should be very simple to understand, and it should be precise as well. Then consistency is very important as well. And the other major property of a good requirement is that it should be feasible as well. That means it should not be like you are building something on the Mars. It should be feasible, realistic, and it should be possible in the real world. Then the necessary you can say response to a client's needs. It should be according to the client's needs, independent of the design, independent of the implementation technique, and verifiable and testable. So that is also important, that it can be verified, and it can be tested, and also it can be traced back to business needs. And in some cases, when you are working for some you can say innovative technology, innovative software, so it should be unique as well. So so there can be multiple techniques to which can help us to detect defects in requirement documentation, which we will discuss in the you can say coming later in the chapter. There is nothing like there's nothing like a whole you can say perfect specification, and we always do not have time or resources, or you can say sometimes you can say skills that for this kind of perfection as well. So you must expect we must expect that there will always be room for you can say improvement in the requirement elicitation process as well. So you must not expect that it will be perfectly error you can say free. There will be no error, there will be no defect in the requirement elicitation process. So the article by Ambler, which is entitled as Examining the Big Requirements Upfront Approach, suggests that it is sometimes ineffective to write detailed requirement early in the life cycle of a software project. That means he claims that this traditional approach increases the risk of a project failure. He stipulates that a large percentage of these specifications are not integrated in the final version of the software, and that the corresponding documentation is rarely updating during the project. So he suggested that this way of working is a outdated way of working. So he recommended that you can use more recent techniques like agile test techniques, which is test-driven development. so that you can produce a minimum amount of paper documentation. So basically, of the view that as that with the passage of time, the software requirement evolves. So with the passage of time, um, as a software requirement involve the documentation will be ineffective for those evolving requirement, because it is not updated as quickly as that of the software requirements itself. So ultimately, when the final project will be in your hands, the requirement documentation will be an entirely different story. So that is why it is better to deploy agile techniques, like a test-driven developments, which actually ensures a minimum documentation and a maximum productivity. So we have observed that the software analysts and designers also often use prototyping, which helps to partially eliminate the traditional requirement document and replace it with a set of user interface and test cases that describe the requirements, architecture, and software design to be developed. Prototype prove useful for pinpointing what the client is envisioning and getting valuable feedback early in the project. So prototyping is a very important, successful technique in the today's world. You just go to the client and show them, okay, this is what you are looking for. We have already done similar project with some other clients. So the client may adopt that you can say prototype as such, but they or may require some additional features into that project as well. So it is easier to do the work that way, because that saves you a lot of money, time, and headache of you can say getting a requirement again and again for the similar projects. So you don't have to do invent the wheel again and again. So you avoid the chances of rework by you can say showing the prototyping by show the prototype to the customers. So I guess we should keep it here. So any question regarding this, you can ask